Yes. So last week we did verse 27. The section was about Ashtanga Yoga. What is Ashtanga Yoga? Different sections. Krishna spoke briefly about yama, niyama, samadhi, etc. And then the outcome of those, like what happens to that person, he attains happiness, and so on and so forth. So he talked about that. So basically the what's that? Brahma Bhuta. Yeah. So liberation. Prabhupada translates Brahma Bhuta as liberation by identification with the absolute. So the identification with the absolute would simultaneously come when, or it's a, so when we detach ourselves, then we go to the devotional part, right? So we move from the number line we discussed, from the negative to zero and from zero to positive. So Brahma Bhuta is the positive part. Okay? So so basically we as a soul have some qualities, right? So there are around 8 qualities of the soul which constitute Brahma Bhuta. The soul is, it's ageless, it's deathless. There is no hunger, no thirst, no grief. It's blissful. Okay, so there's some qualities of Brahma Bhuta stage. So that's the qualities that a person a stage has realized and is experiencing. And he's no more identifying with this body, he's identifying with the absolute. So that's what Brahma Bhuta means. Right? So yeah. So 27 being the Bhuta stage, right? Prashantatma, the word being used in 27th is Prashantatma. Prashanta Manasam. Sorry, Prashanta Manasam. Meaning mind is completely pacified. Right? And how? By having an ultimate goal to pursue. Right? So the basic tenet of the mind is that the mind is looking for clarity and some compelling vision or goal. And once that happens, then the mind becomes peaceful. Then the mind becomes peaceful. Prabhupada says in the report, yes, he says, to be factually liberated from the mode of passion and all material contamination. So what is Krishna conscious? To be factually liberated from mode of passion and material contamination. So that's what happens, that clearer the goal in our mind, to that degree we will experience peacefulness. So when we keep practicing, at a point of time, it'll be that our mind will be willing and eager to hear. The mind will start becoming cooperative as we continue to practice devotional service. And then it can manifest in many ways. You can feel spiritually strong. Right? For example, your mind might suggest something, but then your intelligence will say, no, this is not for us. We don't want to do it. So you don't get any points for doing that. So that's one way that we'll start feeling the spiritual strength when we continue practicing devotional service. There'll be a change of heart. We'll be reluctant to enjoy sense gratification, to engage in sense gratification. So through this authorized process of chanting and sincerity that we put into our chanting, we get detachment and knowledge. Both of them come. So then that's the kind of the place where Brahma Bhuta is attained. Right? So and then Krishna also says Yoginam, Yoginam Sukham Uttama. Yoginam Sukham Uttama. So Sukham Uttama, Uttama, that Tama means darkness, Ut means beyond. So anything beyond darkness is Uttama. So, and then Krishna uses the word Akalmasham. Akalmasham is contamination. So contamination is what is constraining our consciousness. It's constricting our consciousness. Right? But when we start doing bhakti slowly and steadily, things start to move in the positive direction. Initially, it might look like it's not happening because I gave the example, right? The fan is moving. Sorry, we have pulled the plug out of the fan, but the fan is still moving. So that's the stage of, so it's contamination. It might look like it's still contamination, but then it's just the fan kind of slowing down and closing up. Right? So akalmasha, contamination, will be completely freed from the past sinful reactions. And something like bathing, right? On a hot day, it's a hot day, and like typically in India, how hot it gets, and then you're coming in the local train or the local buses, and it's sweating profusely, and a long day, and then you have a thoroughly cleansing bath. So that's kind of the feeling that happens at akalmasha. Atma samapanam, right? Even in the Abhīṣṭa-dohaṁ, the first verse, Mahaprabhu says that Cheto Dharmana Marjanam, Mahadavagni Nirvapanam, Shreya Keva Chandrika, Vidyavadu Jivanam, Vitranam Vidyavadu Jivanam, Anandam Buddhivardhanam, Pratipadam Purnamritashvadanam, Sarvatma Sanapanam, Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankita. It is a complete Sarvatma Sanapanam. That comes as the first verse of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Abhīṣṭa-dohaṁ. Okay, so that was 27. Let's go to 28. So now this section from this up to 32, I think Arjun asked a question. I think 32 or 33, he'll ask a question. Till then, it's more of explaining about Paramatma realization. He's talking about that a person who's practicing Ashtanga Yoga, he realizes the Paramatma. So that's the essence here. Let's look at the word. Yunjan evam sadatmanam yogi vigata kalmashaha sukhena brahma samsparsham atyantam sukham ashrute. So we read in a similar verse in the 5th chapter, yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukha yone aivate adiyantavanta kanteya nateshu ramate buddha. So there was also samparsha. So samparshana means contact, coming in contact. Where is that? Yes, so samparshana is being in constant touch. So in 522, Krishna told us about samsparshaja bhoga. Ja means the material word, samsparshaja bhoga. So when we are connected to samsparshaja bhoga, then we contact with material results in misery. Right? Dukkha yoneya. Yoni, as we know, is like when we enjoy material nature, we become pregnant with misery. We will going to suffer misery because. So here it is Brahma Samsparshana. So contact with the spiritual will get pleasure which is beyond description. Right? It's very much similar to falling in love. Right? When you see somebody, teenagers, when they fall in love, it's so engrossing. It seems as if that the person has dedicated everything to that other person who that person is in love with. Right? It's like practically Shastras tell us to connect ourselves to Krishna, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atma Nivedanam. And all of that eventually we put into a human being, whomever we fall in love with. So it's like we're thinking about that person all the time. So Shravana, we are thinking about it. Kirtana, we're speaking about him or her, whatever. And Atma Nivedam, we completely surrender to that person. Sakya, we like close friends. It's very much like Sarv Dharman Parityaja. We have surrendered everything to that person. So no mother, father, no work, school, nothing. It's an emotion the people are experiencing when they fall in love. Right? And from that emotion comes those symptoms. Otherwise, where the symptoms will come. Right? Like I gave an example of the train, right? In summers, how the train in India, they're just local trains, they're jam-packed with people. And in the middle of that jam-pack might be a boy who's just thinking about a girl, he's in love with. And there's not even a place to stand, but the boy is so engrossed about the girl, that, and he's probably got a handkerchief from that girl. He's been thinking about it, and it's like a treasure for him, even though the girl might have blown her nose in it. So what I'm saying is that that's the kind of an emotion that we have when we fall in love with Krishna. All those symptoms manifest, right? We'll be thinking about Krishna the whole time. And this is an example also used in Padma Puran by devotees. Yuvati Nam Yatha Yuni Yunam cha yuvatau yatha. Mano abhiramate tadvai. Mano me ramatai tvai. Sorry, I think I messed up the last part. But so what it's saying, yuvati nam yatha yuni. Just like a young girl falls in love with a young boy, and a young boy falls in love with a young girl, and they get so engrossed in each other. Similarly, O Krishna, please let my mind be focused towards you with that intensity. So that's Brahma Sparshanam, that kind of an emotion. I just wanted to present it so that you can picture what does Brahma Sparshanam looks like. Right? We get inundated with pleasure when we connect with Krishna, who's the reservoir of pleasure. So he can offer us, only Krishna can offer us that unlimited rasa. And we all also notice it at some levels. You hear a kirtan, you listen to a class, and you feel like, oh my God, the class was so engrossing. I don't want any material pleasures anymore. We get so engrossed in it. So that kind of an engrossment, the state of flow. There's a book called Flow by this professor. What is his name? The Psychology of Flow, the book is called. It tells us that how there are some situations where we get so engrossed that everything else around us just disappears. That kind of focus, that intensity. So that kind of a flow that comes in some service, some hearing to us, that's the kind of Brahma Sparshanam that we'll be having constantly. So that's this verse that Krishna is talking about here. That's Prabhupada saying transcendental contact with Brahma Sparshanam. It's called Brahma Sparshanam. Okay. 29. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. Right? So what happens when you get spiritual realization? So as I said, 29 to 32 is discussing about Paramatma, experience of having seen Paramatma within their hearts. Right? And a direct experience of Paramatma in all jivas is described here. It's an interesting experience, right? So what does it mean observing me in all beings? So we all offer obeisances, right? We see each other, we kind of hold our hands and we offer our respects. So what are we doing is that we are paying obeisances to the divinity within the other person. The word namaste, right? Namaste, namaste. So nama, right? It comes in Nama Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vishtaya. We say that phrase every day. The prayer to Prabhupada. So nama means paying obeisances. Te, you. So, but we are not paying obeisances necessarily to the body, but we are paying obeisances to the divinity within that body, right? So the person whom we are paying our obeisances is divine because of a connection with divine. Right? So that's what it means that we that observes me in all beings. That's the way to understand. So that's the practice of Amani Namanadena. Amani Namanadena Kirtanya Sadahari. That's also coming from Mahaprabhu's Sikshastakam. Right. So this practice leads to Paramatma realization. So right, sometimes when we see this, there are lesser species and we see them as insignificant, right? Sometimes you're chanting and there's this ant crawling towards you and you just push it away. Right? So so that's the principle of Amanina Manvena, that we should give man to everybody understanding that they have Krishna in others. Obviously, it doesn't mean that if you have a spider crawling up on you and you just sit like that, okay, say, oh, I'm not going to do anything to the spider. He's got Krishna sitting in his heart. You obviously have to push the spider away, or so obviously we use our common sense, but then generally it's that we should not consider other species as insignificant. We should not interfere with other living entities' life cycle. That is why meat eating is very detrimental to bhakti. Meat eating, fish, even eating eggs is very detrimental to bhakti practice. Because in all those processes, we are interfering with the life cycle of another living entity. That comes with a big pack of karma for us. And we want to avoid that. That's the goal of bhakti, right? We want to go from the negative to the positive. So that's one level of an uttama, of a person who has had self-realization. So that's the beginning of the self-realization. But then the upper limit is like an Uttamadhikari. So Uttamadhikari, the second part is that the self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. So he's seeing Krishna in everybody. That's the level of an Uttamadhikari. Mahaprabhu says this in the Chaitanya Charitamrita in the Madhya Leela. As Thavara Jangama dekhe, na dekhe tara murti. Sarvatra hai nija ishta devaspurti. So what Uttamadhikari is, he's looking at the advanced devotee. He sees everything, mobile, immobile. He does not see their forms. He immediately sees that there's a manifestation of the form of the Lord, Supreme Lord. He sees the worshipable Lord in everyone. Okay. So that's what the second part means. That he's seeing. So so the first part is more like a beginner yoga practitioner, and the second part is like an Uttamadhikari who kind of perfected the yoga practice. So let me see. Yeah. Okay. And so let's read this. The yogi sees equally because he sees that all living entities, although in different situations, according to the results of fruitive work, in all circumstances, remain the servants of God. While in this material world, the living entity serves the material senses, and while in spiritual energy, he serves the Supreme Lord directly. In either case, the living entity is the servant of God. This vision of equality is perfect in a person in Krishna consciousness. Right? So this is perfect. So Uttamadhikari, he considers everyone as a devotee, even atheists as devotee, right? But when we see that, many Uttamadhikari, Prabhupada was an Uttamadhikari. But Prabhupada, so what Uttamadhikaris do out of compassion for living entities, other living entities, they come from the Uttam platform to the Madhya platform. Right? Because at the Uttam platform, they don't see forms at all. All they are seeing is Krishna in everyone's heart. And they are so humble, they become so humble, they see that everybody's a devotee except me. And not just in thought, in actual conception. They believe in that. That's the humility of such a pure devotee. Right? And they don't see the forms. Right? So that is why a pure devotee can go anywhere and preach anywhere, because he or she will not be affected by it. Like I might have given this example in the past, that was in the beginning, when Prabhupada was here in US, some of his disciples took him to they said, hey Prabhupada, there's a community somewhere nearby, we want you to give a talk there. And Prabhupada went there, he closed his eyes and he started chanting. When he opened his eyes, he saw that in front of him, everybody sitting was naked. It was a nudist colony. But Prabhupada was not at all affected by it. He just gave a class, did the kirtan, and he moved out of there. So that's the quality of an Uttamadhikari, that he doesn't even see bodies platform. So just yesterday, my wife was telling me that in India, recently, Neeta Ambani, she's Mukesh Ambani's wife, she opened a cultural center in Mumbai. And, all the cream of the society was there, all the movie stars, big shot movie stars were there. But who was there? His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj was there, because the Ambanis are close to Radhanath. And in my mind, I was just thinking that, because he's a pure devotee of the Lord, Maharaj can walk anywhere. He's walking in such a society where people are just so materially sense gratifying. Scantily clad women, scantily dressed women, and men who are just, so it's all, you can understand. I don't have to go into it. You already know how it works. But then Maharaj was there. But then Maharaj, being an Uttamadhikari, he's not going to get affected by all that what's happening around him, because he's at a platform where he doesn't see those bodily forms. I see it because I am a neophyte, but then an Uttamadhikari doesn't see it. Right? So a devotee, but then why does an Uttamadhikari come to a Madhyama platform? Right? Somebody can say that, okay, if everything is happening by arrangement of Krishna, why should I even an Uttamadhikari worry to come to the Madhya platform? Right? So an Uttam Adhikari, he understands that although everything is going on perfectly, everyone is getting what they deserve, but then still the living entity is in an unnatural situation by being in Maya, by being self-gratifying. So that is why devotees intervene, right? So that the living entities can get realigned with Krishna and their real purpose in life. That's the reason, right? Lord doesn't do that. Krishna never does that. Krishna says, Sammoham sarva bhuteshu, name dveshvasti na priya. Ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya, maitateshu chapiham. 9th chapter, 29th verse of Bhagavad Gita. He says that I'm equal to all, Krishna says, and I'm not name dveshvasti na priya. I don't envy anybody, I don't overtly love anybody. But then if somebody loves me, comes close to me, I get connected to that person. So Krishna doesn't do it. That is why Krishna is indebted to his devotees, because the devotees do what Krishna cannot do. No, he doesn't. Even though Krishna himself says in the 18th chapter, I don't distribute this knowledge to envious, but then devotees go and distribute it to everybody. Why? Because in the heart, Krishna wants everybody to come to him out of love. But he can't say it because he wants to be just. That is for that reason, when devotees do it, Krishna becomes indebted to those devotees. So that is why an Uttam Adhikari comes to a platform of a Madhyam Adhikari, and then he preaches, he or she preaches. So that's why Prabhupada, when Prabhupada says here that in either case, the living entity is a servant of God. So yes, that is our vision. That's a vision of a devotee. But then a perfect devotee, a pure devotee, still goes out and preaches, even though it seems as if that, okay, this is Lord's plan and everything is going on in Lord's plan. But the devotee, out of compassion, goes and tries to serve everybody, tries to spread this knowledge, because he knows what is in Krishna's heart. And there will be more, I think it's the 32nd verse or 30. There's another verse which talks about the compassion of a pure devotee, just in case of few verses.
Prabhuji?
Yes, Maji.
I had a question, Prabhuji. So in the chapter 5th, right? We have a similar verse, right? Pandita Samadarshina. So it's on the same line, right? This verse is also there, like Vidya Vinay Sampanne. Something. So it's the same verse, right? Prabhuji, it's the same thing, right? A wise person sees everything as a part and parcel of God because he identifies as a soul, right? The same concept is there in this verse also.
Yes,
right?
it's the same concept. Krishna is further expanding upon him. Yes, the first part is the same verse, right? And Prabhupada is also, Krishna is saying, indeed, sees the same Supreme Lord everywhere. So it's there. It was Pandita Samadarshina.
Yeah.
Okay, and here the word is, where is that? Yoga Yuktatma. So it's the same concept, but that was more from a karma yoga perspective. Okay, so it didn't involve any how to say that, not necessarily an activity. This is more from that, but sorry, let me clear that thought. So yes, in that it was karma yoga in action. So a pure devotee is seeing every Krishna sitting in everybody's heart, and here it's more of a realization yogi is attaining. So Krishna is giving a progression, right? Okay, Ashtanga Yoga, Niyama, Yama, and Samadhi, and then this is what you achieve. Okay, and there it was more of an expression of a self-realized soul. It was not a progression necessarily. Krishna was just saying this is a quality of a self-realized soul. Here it comes as it's more detailed, that it's expressing that this is how you come to this position. That's slightly, the meaning is the same, but how we come to that verse is slightly different. Does that make sense, or did I confuse you further?
I guess so, Prabhu.
Let's just keep it that it's the same verse. Let's not go into the details. Yes, it's similar. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, so I see. So okay, so we did this. So did this 29, 30. So Now 30 is an extension of the verse we just read, 29. So for one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I'm never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. Okay. This is an interesting verse here. So so generally what happens is that our life is self-centered. Our life is self-centered, right? So we have a self-perception about ourselves. And what is that perception? Generally, the perception is that I'm the controller. That's one of the perceptions we all have. At least I have, sorry, not all have, but I have. So if I'm the controller, then everything that I see around me is tainted with that self-conception. Like the society, my friends, love, goal, ambition, desires, ideas, situation, everything is tainted with the concept of that I'm the controller. Okay? So now what Krishna is mentioning here is Yomam pashyati sarvatra sarvam chamai pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sacha me na pranashyati. Here Krishna is mentioning that sees me everywhere and sees everything me. So it's more like Krishna is Atmani Akhilatmani. What that means is that he is the soul of my soul. Right? So he's a super soul. So he's the soul of my soul. He's Atmani Akhilatmani. There's a verse that Bhagavatam that is used that says that. So sitting in my heart is a personality more dear to us even than ourselves. But unfortunately, my conception, my self-conception is tainted, that I'm the controller. So I have been disconnected with that super soul. That is why I don't see Krishna everywhere. But then if I'm able to see Krishna everywhere, then I'll realize that there is somebody whom I love more than even myself, and he is sitting in my heart. So Atmani Akhilatmani. In the Brahma Vimohan Leela, in the Bhagavatam, there is a section where Lord Brahma, he wants to check out this kid, everybody is saying he's God, Krishna is God. So he comes to Vrindavan, and just to check Krishna, he steals the cows and the friends of Krishna. And then when he comes back again, he sees that all the cows and children are already there. So he's perplexed. So it's called Brahma Vimohan Leela. But the important part was that, so what Krishna had done, he had created all his friends and his cows from within himself. He couldn't find the other friends and cows, so he created them again. And when these created children and cows and calves, they went back home, their mothers loved them even more than they used to love them when they were their real self, when they were their real babies. So because now they were Krishna. So when so that's it. So there is somebody whom we love more than ourselves. Similarly, right, when in a marriage, when a newlywed wife goes to the husband's house, she treats all the relatives according to her relationship with her husband. So she's very cautious. She's very careful in that relationship because they are her beloved's family, right? So that is what it means that Yomai pashyati sarvatra sarvam chamai pashyati. That's what it means, that it sees everybody in me because you are seeing that everybody's related to. Everybody's related to. So that's the way to look at it. Yes. So I gave two examples, right? One, the Brahma Vimohan Leela, and of a newlywed wife. That's the way to understand this part of it. That sees me everywhere and sees everything. Then Krishna says, for such a person, I'm not lost and the person is not lost. So what that means is that, so he's saying, I'm not never lost, nor is he ever lost to. So the second part means that devotees, they find intervention of Krishna in their lives all the time. So when a devotee comes to the level of that purity, he will see that every action that's happening, he or she will see Krishna's hand in it. So that's the meaning of the second part. There's a story of Narsingh Mehta, but just many times. So what happened was that, and that person is never lost to Krishna also, right? So understand that Krishna is fully invested in that person. So when Narsingh Mehta was a poor man, but he was very devoted to Krishna, all the day chanting, hearing. Her daughter was of a marriageable age, and his wife was always asking him, why don't you look for a groom for your daughter? And then what happens is that a groom comes to that man's house and says, "Oh, I want to marry your daughter," and but then they call the pandit, and the pandit says, "You only have, like, if you marry her in the next 7 days, then only it'll happen. Otherwise, you don't have an auspicious day for the next whole year." So now they want to marry, but they don't have any money. They're very poor. So the wife sends the husband out and says that, here's some jewelry or something. Go and pawn this off, and then get some money, get some things so we can give it to your daughter in marriage. We can have a good marriage ceremony. So he goes out, but then on the way, one of the villages he's passing through, he sees there is a katha happening. There is a Krishna katha happening. And he sits down and he just forgets completely about his daughter's marriage and everything. And then 7 days pass, and his daughter's marriage is technically done by now, because it was to be done within 7 days. And but then he comes back and he's so worried. He's thinking, "Oh my God, how did I forget my daughter's marriage? And everybody will curse me now, they'll chastise me." And then he comes home, and then in his village he hears that everybody's praising the marriage that Narsingh Mehta had done. And he's like suddenly stunned, what's going on here? And then he goes to his wife and she says, "Oh my God, thank you for sending all that stuff. You sent so many good things." And he said, "I sent you?" He says, "Oh yeah. There was this boy who would come and he would tell me that, oh, Mehtaji has sent. And he brought so many jewelry, food items and everything. He arranged for everything." So that's the essence, right? That's that a devotee is fully taken care of by Krishna. Right? So, and not only the devotee, even the people who are closely related to the devotee are taken care of. Prahlad Maharaj, he asked he asked Narsingh Dev Bhagwan. He says, "Tasmat pita me puyeta." That means, "Please liberate my father." Tasmat pita me puyeta. And then Narsingh Dev said, "Tri saptabhi pita uta pitribhir sahate." He's saying Tri saptabhi. So he's saying 7 into 3. Sapta is 7, 3 is 3. So 7 into 3. So 21. Pita, puta, pitribhi. Right? All your generations, 21 generations have been purified. What are you talking about your own father? 21 forefathers have been purified. So that's the beauty. So that's Krishna is establishing here, that if you are devoted to me, I fully take care of you, and not just of you, who are people who are closely related to you. I take care of everybody. Right? And another example of this situation is, sorry, I just want to elaborate on these two verses. They're very important to understand that what Krishna means when he says that I'm in them and they are in me. And so it seems a bit confusing, but you should tease it out and understand what it exactly means, right? Another example is of Ambrish Maharaj and Durvasa Muni. Durvasa Muni got angry on Ambrish Maharaj, long story, but he gets angry and he plucks a hair out and he creates a demon to kill Ambrish Maharaj. Immediately the Sudarshan Chakra comes and kills that demon, and now the Sudarshan Chakra starts running after Durvasa Muni to kill him. And Durvasa Muni, being a highly elevated soul, he's running all over the creation, going to Brahma, to everybody to help him. Nobody helps him. And he eventually comes to Vishnu. And there Vishnu, what does Vishnu tell him? That Aham Bhakta Paradhino. Aham Bhakta Paradhino, he asatantra ivadvija. Sadhu bir grasta hirdyo. Bhaktir Bhakta Janapriya. That I'm sitting in the sadhu's heart, right? I'm not found in Vaikuntha. I can be found in a sadhu's heart, right? And what to speak of my devotees? Even those who are my devotees are very dear. Right? Bhaktir Bhakta Janapriya. So that's the beauty of this concept that Krishna is explaining in this verse. So once again, let's look at these two verses. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, same Supreme Lord everywhere. And the second part is, for one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I'm never lost, nor is he ever lost. An important concept. Okay, let's see what Prabhupada is saying. At this stage of Krishna consciousness, beyond self-realization, the devotee becomes one with Krishna in the sense that Krishna becomes everything for the devotee. And the devotee becomes full in loving Krishna. An intimate relationship between the Lord and the devotee then exists. So Prabhupada is clearly clarifying that being one with Krishna doesn't mean that we go and merge in. We become, but being one in Krishna means that we become fully devoted to him. That's the way to understand. Which one is it? Become 31. Okay, so 31 is also a similar verse that we used. 30. Such a yogi who engages in the worshipful service of the super soul, knowing that I and the super soul are one, remains always in me in all circumstances. Right? So now Krishna is talking about me, Mam. He's talking about me. So it's engages in the worshipful service of the super soul, knowing that I and the super soul are one, remains always in me in all circumstances. So it's always in me. So that, so they were saying, right, the devotee sees that Krishna's intervention in everything. So that's what Krishna established. He remains always in me in all circumstances. He's fully conscious of Krishna the whole time. Such a yogi. When he's doing that worshipful service of the super soul, and then knowing that super soul and I are the same. So that connection has to be made. That is why Ashtanga yoga in itself doesn't have much value if the person doesn't capture the bigger picture. The bigger picture meaning that Ashtanga yoga is just one of the rungs of the ladder to take you to bhakti. But if I think that Ashtanga yoga is all in itself, then it's never going to be complete. It's not going to be complete. Because that's why Krishna is establishing and highlighting, knowing that I and super soul are one. But if you just remain, if you think that, oh, Paramatma realization is all in all, there is nobody beyond the Paramatma, then that's not a complete practice. Then it's incomplete. And let's see what Prabhupada is saying here. Krishna consciousness is the highest stage of trance and yoga practice. This very understanding that Krishna is present as Paramatma in everyone's heart makes the yogi faultless. So having that connection that Krishna is present as Paramatma, then that yogi becomes faultless. If the yogi thinks that Paramatma is all in all, then he becomes faultful. Then it's a fault, it's incompleteness. Yep. Okay. So let's see what next. 32 is that first. Okay. Yes. So that's the concept being explained here. How Krishna becomes fully under the control of a devotee, and the devotee is also fully dedicated to Krishna. And with all the examples I mentioned, Narsingh Mehta, there's Ambarish Maharaj, all these examples, they elaborate upon this concept. Yoma pashyati sarvatra samam sarva chamai pashyati. Okay, I'll take a pause here. Any thoughts from anyone? Any comments, questions? The concept is clear to everyone? It's going to be in the exam. We'll have to elaborate on this concept. It seems like it's clear to everyone. Good. Okay, 32. He's a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and their distress. O Arjuna, Atma Upena Sarvatra Samam Pashyati Arjuna Sukham Va Yadi Va Dukkham Sa Yogi Paramo Mataha. So this verse describes empathy, Atmiyata, as they call it in Sanskrit. Right? So till now, what we have been discussing is the vision of a self-realized soul, such a self-realized. Now it's about action, right? How that self-realized soul, he or she sees suffering of others as his own. And Prahlad Maharaj in the 7th canto, there's a verse there, I think it's the 9th chapter, where he says that Prahlad Maharaj says, I am not afraid of this material existence, Bhagwan. Wherever I live, I'll be always absorbed in your glories. But my concern is for the fools and rascals in this world who are making these elaborate plans to be happy here in this material world. They're maintaining their families, societies, countries, so on and so forth. So I'm simply concerned about them out of love. So that's the level of an Uttam Adhikari. Prabhupada, once he was having a walk, and it was somewhere he was on his morning walk, and he saw that there was this a big park and people were playing golf. And Prabhupada, coming from India, he didn't know what golf was. He'd never seen that game before. And he asked them, what are these people doing? And he says, and then one of his disciples said, Prabhupada, they're playing a game called golf. And Prabhupada then, asked more questions. They said that, oh, they all are old and retired, and so they come and play here. They spend their time playing golf. And Prabhupada started crying. Not like crying heavily, but just you could see tears in his eyes. And he was thinking that you've spent your entire life running after money and saving money and being that material mode. And now when you have time, you're wasting it in hitting a ball around here and there. So that's the kind of a vision of a pure devotee. He sees the suffering of others. Prabhupada, when the Mayapur building was being made, the Lotus building, Prabhupada was one day on the roof of that building, and he saw that once when the devotees had prasadam, then they would throw away their those plates made out of leaves. You might have seen in India, they're available, and they would just throw them in somewhere in one place. And Prabhupada saw from the roof that there were children, local children, who were coming and fighting on who would get the remnants in those, because they were so poor, they were hungry. And that made Prabhupada cry. And he said, from now on, nobody within a 10-mile radius or 10-kilometer radius of my temple should go hungry. And that's where the whole concept of food for life came into being. Prabhupada said that. So that's an essence of a pure devotee. He can see the suffering of others, right? So obviously we can think about ourselves also. That's not that we cannot think about ourselves. Typically, bhakti yogis, what they do is they keep the needs, interests, and concerns of others before their own, for the sake of for those other people to make spiritual advance. Right? It's not a spiritual expression, like Bharat Maharaj, right? Bharat Maharaj also had compassion. You can say, oh, Bharat Maharaj was also compassionate, but his compassion was misplaced compassion. He went to help a deer. He thought, oh, I can help the deer. So there was just some sense of aham mameti, like me, I'm doing it. So devotee is not in that kind of a compassion. So what a devotee does, if you look at it analogically, so we have talked about that concept of the boat, right? So you're in a boat, the boat is getting stronger and you're holding tight onto that boat. And what happens is that you're holding that boat with a rope, right? So, but then what is that rope? If you look at it in an analogy, all the practices that we do every day, consistency and sincerity, with consistency and sincerity, is like adding a filament every day to it. So, right, when you start for the first time, how do they make ropes? I don't know if you've ever seen a video. There are so many filaments in it, tiny, thin filaments, plastic filaments. So what happens is that initially one filament comes and another one comes, right? And the other filament added the next. Then you get a thread out of it. And then you keep adding filaments and then you get a string out of it. And then, you keep adding those more and more filaments, then it becomes a rope, right? Similarly, in bhakti process, every single day, whatever we do is adding like a filament to that rope, that analogical rope that I'm talking about. So when you keep adding that filaments after filaments, within 20, 30 years, you will have of you being sincere and consistent, you'll have something substantial to hold on to, that rope. And when you have that something substantial to hold on to, so with one hand, going back to my analogy, what I was saying, so with one hand, you are holding the rope, holding your boat tight and strong, even though there are a lot of waves coming and hitting you, you're not budging. And with the other hand, you're helping others. You're giving the other hand to people to pull them up out of this material ocean. So I just wanted to give this analogy that how do we reach that stage of Atma Vipayena Sarvatra Samam Pashyati Suvarcha. So keep adding those filaments every single day by sincerity and consistency, and one day we will see ourselves strong enough. And it's not like that it'll be one day you are not at all strong and the next morning you wake up. It's a gradual process. So it's not like only when you get fully strong, 20, 30 years, then you go and help others. You can, but you'll have to judge whom you can pull, whom you cannot pull. You have to be cautious about that. Sometimes it could be so strong, the pull from the other end, from that material world, whom you're trying to pull out, could be so strong that that person might pull you into the ocean because you have not added enough filaments to make that rope strong. So we have to be cautious about that. Just this morning, I was talking to a devotee, and he was telling me that how many a times his family is so much materially focused, and one of his elder brothers thinks that he's God himself, that it disturbs the devotee, that the one whom I was talking to. And I clearly told him that you have to be a bit selfish there. And I was giving him another analogy that how, in the past, people would make moats around forts. So moat is like making a deep water, like you might have seen, right? There's a fort and then all around it is water, and that has hungry crocodiles in it. So nobody can come into that fort except when the fort lowers its door for somebody to come over. So similarly, we also can make a moat around it, and only letting the right things come into us. So we have to be cautious. I'm just trying to give both the pictures, helping others, but then also being cautious that we know whom we can help and whom we cannot. Should be something. So there are many applications of this verse. We should not deride others who are lower than us in bhakti process. Don't ridicule. We should not ridicule them. Somebody told me recently that how he's a devotee of Lord Ram, and he went to one of ISKCON temples, and somebody told him that, hey, don't speak out loud that you're a devotee of Lord Ram. People in ISKCON don't appreciate that. And I was practically just, face palming myself, banging my head in the wall and telling them that, we celebrate Ram Navami. Lord Ram is such an important place in Krishna consciousness, in ISKCON. And you're telling him that praying to Lord Ram is not appropriate. It's just, devotees can get so engrossed in the way they think that they start ridiculing others. So we should not do that. We should be cautious to avoid that. So, the dealing of a preacher is to be compassionate. We should always think that whomever we meet, even if it's for a minute, for an hour, for a day, for light, how can we add value in other person's life in that brief interaction we are having with them? No interaction should go haywire. It should not go unutilized. Now, that is why keeping books in your car is always very good. Whomever you meet, books in your car, in your home, have books. You meet somebody and you can give them a book. You can pass on a book to them. And you just say, hey, this is a book about yoga and meditation, helps you get rid of stress and anxiety, helps you focus within. It's been read by so many people, Thoreau, Emerson, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther, so and so forth. There's a script out there that you can read. So we don't want to miss any occasion to spread this knowledge to others, whatever brief interaction it may be. Right? So Atma Pena Sarvatra. So yogi is aware of the pain that is inherent in this material world from his or her own experience. Prabhupada says this in the purport. One who is Krishna consciousness is a perfect yogi. He is aware of everyone's happiness and distress by dint of his own personal experience. So I know from my own experience that I have tried so many times, I've failed, and even when I succeeded, I knew that it was very meager, and it brought a lot of distress also along with it. So from my own experience and taking proper account of those experiences, I have made myself strong enough that I don't want to be trapped into it anymore. So in one of the Puranas, the example is given that a person becomes as sensitive as an eyeball, right? On our eyeballs, even if a tiny anything, a piece of dust comes and hits us, it becomes so agitated. Similarly, a yogi, a bhakti yogi, he becomes so sensitive of this material world because he's aware of the pain. She's aware of the pain. This is an important verse, and I'm guessing, I'm not 100% sure, but this is one of the verses that we should memorize. So this also serves to tell us that this and the ones that we've just read, that even though Krishna is talking about Dhyana Yoga, but still he brings everything to Bhakti. He brings he's just indirectly bringing Bhakti into the whole process. Just like a father, right? A father and mother, they tell a child, hey, these are the options you have. But down deep in their heart, they're still hoping that the child makes the right decision. They don't want to be forceful, but then they also want the child to make the right decision. So they tell them, okay, hey, this is what you can do. This is what you'll get if you do this. This is what you'll get if you do that. And they said, hey, you make a decision of your own. So similarly, Krishna, he's telling the different yoga forms to Arjun, but down deep, he's just wishing, hey, Arjun, don't make a foolish decision and fall for any of these yoga practices. Bhakti yoga is the ultimate. Here is a contrast between a pure devotee of the Lord and a yogi interested only in his personal elevation. The yogi who has withdrawn to a secluded place in order to meditate perfectly may not be as perfect as a devotee who is trying his best to turn every man toward Krishna consciousness. So sitting in a secluded place is not appropriate in today's age. That is why Prabhupada always wanted a center in the heart of the city. You will see that most of the centers that we have that have been around for a long time, most of them, not all of them, are in the heart of the city. They're not away from the city. I have seen a few of them myself. You go to Atlanta Temple is in downtown, heart of the city. And so Prabhupada wanted, because they wanted to come and talk, be in the center where the activity is happening. They don't want to go to secluded. Okay, that ends the section where Paramatma realization is being elaborated. So, and now Arjun will ask questions. So I think 33 and 34 is Arjun's question. Okay. Let's see what Arjun's question is. Arjun said, "O Madhusudan, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me. For the mind is restless and unsteady." So here he is using the phrase chanchalatvat sthitam sthiram. Okay. So chanchalatvat, it is restless, it's unstable. So that's what he's saying, impractical, unendurable, restless and unsteady. So now Arjun is talking about Samena. So Samena has been used, just now Shalini was bringing up that verse, Samadarshina. So now Arjun is using some similar words to Krishna. He's using Samayena, right? Krishna uses the word, and then Krishna also uses the word, what is that? Pashyami is being used here, right? So Krishna also just used the word Pashyami recently, that yo mam pashyati sarvatra samam yocha. So samam cha yo mai pashyati. So the Pashyami word was also used. So Arjun is just kind of presenting that, oh, I'm picking up from what you are speaking. I'm not creating anything. So he's still trying to, he's submissive. Krishna is not as if he's antagonistic to what Krishna is saying, but then he's also expressing his reservations. So he's very much asking, like, hey Krishna, how can I see everybody equally? How can I see Karan and Bhim, my brother, equally? How can I see Duryodhan and Yudhishthira equally? Right? So he's expressing his submission. He's submissive. He's not offensive, but then he's also having a reservation, and that's a sign of intelligence. So doubting is a sign of intelligence. Right? Just like Dhruv Maharaj, when Dhruv Maharaj was when he was going away to the forest, Narad Muni comes there. Narad Muni tells him, "Go back. You're a 5-year-old boy. You cannot do this hard practice of yoga." So what does Dhruv Maharaj says? "My dear sage, I appreciate what you're saying, but I don't understand it right now. So if you can tell me how to realize God, tell me. Otherwise, please go." So Arjun is accepting instructions. So he's accepting them as true, but then he cannot practically apply them. That's what he's saying. So we all have the right to express our reservations, not surrendering our intelligence, but surrendering with intelligence. So basically, and then let's see the purport. Prabhupada, many times what Prabhupada does is, so Prabhupada, so as we have talked about it in the past, that Prabhupada is presenting in Bhagavad Gita that Bhagavad Gita is the summary of all the Vedas. Right? Sarvopanishado Gavo. It is the supreme Veda, supreme Upanishad. It condenses everything. So what he does is, many times he will quote verses, but then many times he puts those verses in the running text also in English. Like for example, like he's posing that people are not serious about self-realization. And so he said people are of short duration. in this age of Kali. So he's mentioning about the age of Kali, right? And this coming from the first canto of Bhagavatam, where he's saying, where Sukadeva Goswami tells us that in this age we are manda sumanda mateo manda bhagya hi upadrita. We are disturbed, we are short-lived, we are unlucky. So the qualities are here. So Prabhupada is highlighting those, that how can you practice this complicated yoga in this age when Arjun could not even practice this 5,000 years ago. He's giving it up right 5,000 years. So that's what he's saying. And then Prabhupada mentions, in fact, we do not find any record in history of his practicing at any time. Okay. So somebody can question this statement, because Arjun was supposedly meditating. There are many situations, when he's trying to get alms from Lord Shiva, Lord Indra, he's shown as sitting in a meditative pose. He went to the forest and he does some yogic postures. But then the purpose there is not Ashtanga Yoga. The purpose there is demigod worship for the purpose of bhakti. So he wants to serve Krishna, and the war that Krishna has envisioned, that where all these negative elements will be completely gone. So he's gone to collect weapons for that war. So he's serving Krishna, but through demigod worship. So it's not Ashtanga Yoga. What I was highlighting, this is not Ashtanga Yoga. Okay. But that doesn't mean that bhakti yogis cannot practice this. Bhakti yogis also do yama niyama, right? We have talked about yama niyama, that not speaking lies and those things we discussed earlier. So devotees can, bhakti yogi can also do that. So let's see if anything else. Okay, 33, 34. 34, just 35. 35, Krishna will start answering. Okay, so now Arjun is just further expanding on this statement, what he just said, which is that it's unpractical and unendurable. Mind is restless and unsteady. So now he's going to further expand on the mind, and he gives four adjectives for the mind: chanchalam, pramathi, balavad, dridham. Restless, turbulent, obstinate, strong. So chanchalam, let's look at these four qualities. So chanchalam is restlessness. But what kind of a restlessness? It's like restlessness of a child. A child cannot sit quietly. And that restlessness can lead to mischief, it can lead to occasional injuries, little danger in there. So that's chanchalam, what it means. But our second is paramathi. So now paramathi means madness. Okay? And this paramathi word comes in many places. Rishabh Dev talks about it in the 5th chapter. Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma. He says that when somebody considers the sense gratification as the aim of life, the person becomes mad after materialistic desires. Right? And he engages in all kinds of sinful activities. That's the level of madness. So madness can be of different levels. There can be a madness where you can have a defect in your brain. Sorry, not you, but in general, people can have a defect in the brain, and they can be admitted to some mental asylum, right? They can be disconnected to the realities. So a child is not necessarily mad, right? So chanchalam doesn't mean that it also includes paramathi. So child is not necessarily mad; he can be restless. So there are different levels of madness. Okay. So sometimes when that's the next level. So paramathi, balavad. So sometimes even if one is mad, it may be strong. Right? So madness along with strength, like a strong boxer. Right? Who was that boxer? Mike Tyson. He kind of chewed off somebody's ear in one of the fights. So he's just mad, but then he's also physically strong. Right? In the story of the Avanti Brahman, which comes in the 11th canto, there is a mention about mind's god-like powers. Ferocious, it's ferocious. And Krishna also says this in the 7th chapter, no, not 7th, sorry, 10th chapter. Indriyanam manaschasya, that among the senses, I am the mind. So mind is a representation of Krishna's energy, Krishna's power, right? So for practical purposes, you can even see this Maya as mind, right? Because the Maya is working through the mind. So Maya is anything that takes us away from Krishna. So mind is playing a very significant role in that whole process of taking us away from Krishna. So mind is restless, can be restless like a child, but then you can add madness to it, matta, and then you can add strength to it, balavad, and then lastly you can add dridham to it. Dridham means obstinate. Now you see this word dridham also used across in many places in Bhagavad Gita. In the 9th chapter, Krishna is talking about Satvam Kirtayan Tomam Yatantascha Dridhavata. Dridha. There, dridha means determination. Here, the word dridha means obstinate. Right? So, dridham is used in a negative sense here. So there are two things: determination and obstinacy. Obstinacy, obstinacy, obstinacy. Obstinacy. This is obstinacy. So it can be obstinate or it can be determined. The word dridha can mean both of them. Right? Determination, the difference, how do you differentiate between both of them? Determination is like when there is something noble and good and you need to work very hard for it. You have to strive very hard for it. That's called determination. Obstinacy is when something is undesirable and one doesn't still give it up, even though he or she gets messages from many different sources. Examples are Ravan and Duryodhana. Ravan was told by so many people. Hanuman came and burned his city. Then Angad came and nobody could move his foot. And then Vibhishan told him. Ravan's own wife, Mandodari, told him. And there were many other suggestions that, please return Sita respectfully. But he did not listen. He was obstinate. He was not determined. He was obstinate. Right? Determination in a similar situation, in a similar pastime was of Hanuman. He was on a task to find Mother Sita. And he had to go through so much. There were so many incidences. There was a demoness who caught him in the water, in the ocean, and so there are many such troubles he had to go through. But his purpose was noble. So he was determined, whereas on the other hand, Ravan was obstinate. So that's what here. So these 4 categories have been given for the mind, and then Arjun is using a analogy and saying that it's easy to control the wind, but not easy to control them. Okay? He's using an analogy, and a similar analogy Krishna had also used. Right, there was an analogy of a windless lamp. Right. So now Arjun is giving an opposite of that. You're talking about windless lamp. It might be easy for me to control a hurricane, like a wind moving at a very fast pace, but I cannot control the mind. So if you notice the way Arjun is presenting, he's still continuing to counter Krishna without being offensive. He's still countering Krishna by using similar analogies, similar words, and all that. Pashyami, pashyati, all that similar words. Dridham. So all that. So Arjun is doing that here. And then Prabhupada, let's see what Prabhupada is saying. Okay, so Prabhupada is using the chariot body analogy. So we all must have seen in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a picture in this one of those centerfolds where there is a chariot. And so that comes from this Upanishad. And there's mention of that in Bhagavad Gita also. But then this is the more detailed one here. And then Prabhupada is saying intelligence is supposed to direct the mind, but the mind is so strong and obstinate that it often overcomes even one's own intelligence. And then acute infection may surpass the efficacy of medicine. So the mind can be so strong that it can overcome our intelligence also. That is why, as I was saying, in the 11th canto, Avanti Brahman says that mind has a godlike fearsome power. Okay. 35, and I think 36 is also Krishna, and then 37 Arjun. Yeah. So we'll do 2 more verses and then we'll wrap up. 37, kind of a different mood opens up. Arjun opens up a different mood. Now he's in 37, he'll accept what Krishna is saying, but he's saying, what happens if I fall down? Let's see now, how does Krishna answer Arjun's question. Lord Shri Krishna said, O mighty armed son of Kunti, It is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and detachment. Abhyasena and vairagya. Vairagya. Two things have been mentioned here. Practice and detachment. So that's what Krishna is mentioning here. So in the first part of this verse, Krishna is empathizing with Arjuna. Hey, I understand it's difficult to overcome. So Krishna is empathizing him. So the message that Krishna is giving to all of us is that we should not chastise or dishearten people. Right? If someone comes to us and says, hey, I can only do one round, you don't just start belittling them. We don't start belittling them. Oh, just one round? What have you been doing? You've been coming to a temple for years now and you only do one round? We don't do that. We don't dishearten people. We should not do that. So our principles are, our philosophy is lofty, but we bring it down to people's level. Right? That's what realization means. Prabhupada talks about in the first canto of Bhagavatam. He says that realization means when you can give this message in a way that it is acceptable and understandable for the person you're speaking to. That's what realization means. Right? I might be able to quote many verses here and there. My language might be flowery, but if I'm not able to convey the message, everything is useless effort. So, and we read this in the, what is that, in the third chapter, right? Na buddhi vedam janiyat jnanam karma sangyam joshayet sarva karmani. But it says that Krishna says this in the third chapter, that we don't disturb ignorant people. You don't disturb anybody. Just try to engage them in bhakti indirectly or directly, whatever way works for them. So use your intelligence to convey this message in the way that the people can understand. Right? So now Krishna is using some very generic terms here. Abhyasa and vairagya, practice and detachment. So what are the different, how do both these things come into being? So when we are sick, let's say I'm sick, I go to a doctor and the doctor gives me a medicine. But the doctor also gives me some things which we're not supposed to do. Right? So practice is abhyasena and vairagya is things we don't do. So there is a prescription and there is a proscription. So that's the way it is. Right? Our mind is always going here and there, and we always bring it back to where we are in the process of bhakti. Right? So that is practice, bringing it back. And then avoiding things that disturb us is vairagya. So where does this, so practice and detachment, right, is the detachment practice. So when we practice, we get detachment, right? So at that, the practice is to be sincere. That's as we have been talking about again. So sincerity brings that sense of detachment in our hearts. And then Prabhupada is, let's see the purport. This attachment is called Parishānubhāva, spiritual satisfaction. It is just like the feeling of satisfaction a hungry man has for every morsel of food he eats. The more one eats while hungry, the more one feels satisfaction and strength. So Prabhupada is quoting a verse. Let me see if I can pull it up. I think that is 11:242. He talks about this verse 11. So Prabhupada does that quite often. He will not necessarily quote the verse, but he will put it in the running text. 11:242. For anybody keeping track, it's 11:242. Bhaktir parishanubhavo viraktir anyatra chaishatrika ekakal prapadyamanasya dhashnata shriyush tushti pushti shuddhapayo anughasham. Devotion, direct experience of the Supreme Lord, and detachment from other things. These three occur simultaneously for one who has taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the same way that pleasure, nourishment, and relief from hunger comes simultaneously and increasingly with each bite for the person engaged in eating. Prabhupada is quoting this verse here in the text, that if a feeling of satisfaction goes away as he eats one morsel. Right? Satisfaction comes. Similarly, when we practice bhakti, we automatically become attached to Krishna, and then we get detached from this material things. Yes, okay. So bhakti parishanu bhava virakti anyatha chaisati karite. So yes, so that is the that is how Krishna is now addressing Arjun's, which is verse 35. 36. So one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult. But he whose mind is controlled and who strives by appropriate means is assured of success. That is my opinion. Okay, so interesting. So this is verse 36 is the answer. So the point of this verse is that if one controls mind with proper endeavor, it is possible. Right? So now Krishna, he's encouraging Arjun. So he's encouraging Arjun surely. That yeah, I understand it's hard. So kind of a similar approach like it was in the last verse. But then he's also, so he's encouraging Arjun, but he's not compromising. It's not like Krishna is saying, oh yeah, fine, I understand it. You know, oh yeah, don't control your mind. No, Krishna is not saying that. So he's encouraging and non-compromising, uncompromising at the same time. So he's not compromising with the principle that you have to control your mind. But then he's also accepting it that yes, it is hard, I understand. Right? So encouraging without being, without compromising. So the first two, okay, yes, so that's what the way it is. Yes, so it's encouraging and non-compromising at the same time. Okay. So, okay, let's see what Prabhupada has to say here. So unless one is engaged in Krishna consciousness, he cannot steadily control the mind. A Krishna conscious person easily achieves the result of yoga practice without separate endeavor, but a yoga practitioner cannot achieve success without becoming Krishna conscious. So it's not vice versa. So if you're in bhakti, you can achieve the results of all the other yoga practices without even putting in. But if you're doing the other yoga practices, you cannot get the benefits of being in Krishna consciousness. So Krishna consciousness is complete. It has everything in it. Whereas other rungs of the ladder are incomplete until they are not connected to bhakti. So that is my opinion. So Krishna is still saying it's my opinion, giving you my opinion. So what Prabhupada is highlighting here that in the last section which we just read, that how bhakti is very easy because it includes everything. Whereas other things are not easy and they're hard, but then also they're incomplete if you don't connect them to bhakti. In the 8th chapter, we'll read that how Krishna will say, Ananya Cheta Satatam Yo Mam Smarati Nityasa Tasyaham Sulabh Partha. Sulabh, you already, it's easy, it's very easy. So Tasyam Sulabh Partha, this practice of bhakti, when you focus on me, it's Sulabh, it's very easy. The whole concept of self-realization becomes very easy. And Prabhupada is saying here that it's not easy if you practice the other yoga forms. Then it's not going to be easy. Okay, so now Arjun is going to ask a completely different question. I won't start that today. We'll start this section. So we are at verse 37.